I am an Assyrian, a descendant of the Assyrian Babylonian empires of Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. I am immensely proud of my heritage. So much of the world is focused on the today and now that the past is often ignored and forgotten. So today, I will talk to you about my Assyrian heritage, how and why I came to identify with it, and the importance of maintaining the continuity of the Assyrian nation. Until recently, to the oft-asked question of, where are you from? I would reply, I am half American, half French. It was easy and simple, tying my identity to two defined, well-known countries and cultures. And yet, I knew that the truth of my heritage was far more layered. My father, my American half, who converses with me in English, speaks Assyrian with his parents and sister. It is otherwise known as Aramaic, an old Semitic language that Jesus spoke and in which the original Bible is written. Over the years, my grandparents would encourage me to learn Assyrian. As much as I loved them, and as important as I sensed it was for them, I did not learn Assyrian. Why should I have? I was, after all, half American, and English is the language of my American half. And they, my paternal family, speak perfect English. I did ask my father once or twice about Assyrians. My father would explain his heritage to me, but though interesting, it was not concrete. There is no country today that is called Assyria. I did not know other Assyrians. I would sporadically meet relatives, but they were not a part of my life. I did not eat Assyrian food. I did not know Assyrian music. I did not know Assyrian dances. Assyria was only an amorphous concept, and Assyrian was a vague heritage that was always in the background of my consciousness. It was not a heritage I identified with. Up until 8 months ago, when I lost my paternal grandparents to whom I was very close. What I did not know, and which I learned during their funeral services, and during research I did about their lives, was that my grandparents were prominent Assyrian leaders, activists, and nationalists. In learning about my grandparents, I resolved to learn more about Assyrians. And, in learning about the past, I have learned about my present. Now, like my father and his parents, my Assyrian heritage informs my identity. To the oft-asked question of, where are you from? I now say I am half Assyrian American, half French, which invariably elicits perplexed responses of, Assyrian? What does it mean to be Assyrian? Who are Assyrians? On April 1st, 2022, we celebrated the Assyrian New Year of 6,772. Yes, we have been in existence as a nation for almost 7,000 years. Assyria originated in northern Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, which is now divided between 4 countries: Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. Assyria was originally a city-state centered on the city of Ashur. Over millennia, the city-state grew to be a mighty empire. Assyria was the first true empire of Western civilization. It extended from Persia, or today's Iran, down to the Mediterranean Sea. Assyrians were innovators and made important inventions we still use today: libraries, irrigation systems, and other agricultural techniques, accounting, administration, medicine, and scientific methods. The Library of Ashurbanipal and the Gardens of Nineveh are some of the most important historical finds of the world. The Assyrian Empire fell in 609 BC. Assyria has not existed as a country since then. Yet, for almost 3,000 years, Assyrians have existed as a nation in Mesopotamia. Assyrians survived for centuries because they lived in villages and towns where they were the dominant population, spoke their own language, and worshipped together. But to a 17-year-old, this is stuff that one reads in history books. Yes, it helped me to begin to understand my heritage, but what made me feel why my grandparents became Assyrian activists, and ultimately result in my identifying as an Assyrian, has been the more recent past. That is, what has happened to our people in the last century. From the 14th century to the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire encompassed Mesopotamia, home of Assyrians. In the late 19th century, the Ottomans started persecuting the minorities, such as Assyrians and Armenians, who were their citizens. The genocide of 1914 to 1918, widely known as the Armenian Genocide, is in fact also the Assyrian Genocide, where more than 750,000 Assyrians were massacred, and this led to the exodus from our homeland. But this was also the dawn of Assyrian nationalism. Early Assyrian leaders demanded the right to a homeland in Mesopotamia as the solution to stopping the persecution of Assyrians. The British who were fighting the Ottomans in World War I and wanted allies against them, promised Assyrians a homeland upon the breakup of the Ottoman Empire. Do you know what happened? The British and the French entered into the Sykes-Picot Agreement in secret in 1916 as a way to partition the Ottoman Empire into British and French spheres of influence. Sykes-Picot created the Middle East as we know it today. They initiated the continuous wars and persecutions in the region over the last 100+ years. And yes, they reneged on their promises of an Assyrian homeland. This historic betrayal has had catastrophic consequences. After the genocide of 1914 to 1918, Assyrians have been the subject of some of the most violent massacres in the Middle East. The 1933 massacre in Sameleh, instigated by the then newly formed Iraqi kingdom, and in my lifetime, the 21st century genocide by ISIS. Understandably, the Assyrian diaspora has accelerated with each genocide. Today, the majority of the 5 million+ Assyrians live across the globe, instead of in our homeland in northern Mesopotamia. So today, in 2022, what do we do? I take inspiration from my grandparents, who were the leaders of the second wave of Assyrian nationalism from the 1950s through to the 1990s. From their home base in Iran and later in the United States, my grandparents led the reawakening of the Assyrian nation and demand for our homeland in Mesopotamia. They founded and ran global political newspapers and cultural and educational institutions, global political parties, and in Mesopotamia, local parties that formed an armed militia. Their activism was both global and local, during a period in history when the Assyrian community was relatively evenly split between those living in diaspora and those living in our homeland. Inspired by the legacy of my grandparents, I want to be a part of the next wave of Assyrian nationalism, that of my generation who are scattered across the globe. We must ensure that my generation and future ones know our heritage and identify as Assyrians. We must speak Assyrian. We must learn and spread our history and culture globally to evangelize our identification with our heritage. And we must remain connected to the Assyrians living in our homeland. They are besieged and need to know that a global community is supporting them and advocating for an Assyrian nation. Given today's technology, these are far easier to accomplish than during the era of my grandparents. Their accomplishments were enormous, and we must build on them. We cannot let our heritage and who we are get lost. I am determined that for the next generation of Assyrians, Assyria will no longer be an amorphous concept. I am determined to make it concrete, so that in the years ahead, a 17-year-old Assyrian can readily identify with being an Assyrian, and not only because she was researching the lives of her beloved grandparents. Avitun Basime. Thank you.